Streaming now, this is the Wood TV Live
budget
Desk.
as governor, one that prioritizes putting people back to work, sending kids back to school safely so that we can build back better. Those are the three most important things that we need to be focused on. The budget is one piece of a larger effort of my administration that we are undertaking to keep Michigan moving forward despite the colliding crises that we face. The other piece is the Michigan COVID recovery plan, which I proposed last month, kids back, to spend the federal funds that have been allocated to us in a bipartisan bill signed months ago by President Trump. My fiscal year 2022 of a large budget builds on the recovery proposal that I have already laid out and keeps Michigan on the road to recovery. Every budget is about values. It's not just a balance sheet, it is a statement of your values. And this one makes mine clear. Equitably growing our economy by investing in our children in public education, expanding economic opportunity, safeguarding public health, backing essential infrastructure projects and clean energy initiatives, and protecting the environment. These are the priorities I hope we can all get behind, Republicans and Democrats alike. And I look forward to passing the budget and signing the budget and delivering for the people of Michigan. First, let's start with our families. The COVID-19 pandemic has exacerbated so many underlying issues and ongoing challenges faced by families in Michigan and across the country. In order to keep us on track, we need to make historic investments in Michiganders of all ages to empower them to continue learning in the classroom and pursue post-secondary opportunities. To do so, my budget calls for the largest investment in K-12 schools in Michigan's history. Some highlights include $203 million investment to increase the base per pupil funding and an increase of $14.1 million to continue implementing the weighted foundation model that ensures that students in special education programs, students facing poverty, students in rural and isolated districts, and English language learners have the resources they need to succeed in our public schools. It also includes $200 million to help schools and districts stabilize and mitigate the impacts of COVID-19 on their student body, and an additional $250 million to facilitate student academic recovery, mental and physical health, and post-secondary transition. Also, we are releasing a plan today to make sure no students slip through the cracks amidst the transition to remote learning in the past year. $120 million is included for summer learning and enrichment programs so our kids can make up the ground they lost during the pandemic. And $55 million for the Filters First program, so all schools can provide their students access to clean, safe drinking water. Our children have adopted and adapted to changing circumstances in remarkable ways, and we need to do our part to make sure that they have the support that they need. Working parents have also made countless sacrifices, large and small, to keep their families going. To give working parents a much needed boost, my budget invests $370 million to significantly lower child care costs and early childhood learning. In some cases, we will take this cost down to zero. This game-changing investment in early learning will provide access to quality, affordable care for 150,000 additional Michigan families. It immediately and directly helps parents continue working while giving them the peace of mind to know that their kids are continuing to grow and learn. I am particularly proud of this piece because we know the impact that COVID has had on women and working moms. They've borne the brunt of this economic pain during this pandemic. Since the beginning of the pandemic, women have been hit hardest by coronavirus layoffs, and as we approach the year mark, hundreds of thousands, 275,000 in January alone, have been forced to leave the workforce due to the pandemic. It's been called a she-cession for good reason. A total of 2.4 million women, disproportionately women of color, have left the workforce since February of last year. By making a sizable investment in childcare, we can help alleviate the burden faced by working families here in Michigan, especially women and specifically women of color, who've had to make countless sacrifices to put food on the table and care for their kids. So this investment is a good start. Now let's talk about some of the shovel-ready projects that this budget backs. I know you're probably sick of me saying fix the damn roads by now, but I'm not going to stop until we rise to meet the true infrastructure challenges our state faces. That has been building up for decades. This budget helps us get there with real investments, like $300 million to repair approximately 120 local bridges, including 60 that are so dangerous they should be closed right now. These bridges are in counties spanning the state from Oakland to Ottawa, Genesee to Grand Traverse, Macomb to Iron. One of these bridges is the Miller Road Bridge, next to the Ford factory that builds one of Michigan's and America's most iconic vehicles, the F-150. We also included in this budget $290 million in infrastructure grants for the Michigan Clean Water Plan, a critical investment that confronts our significant water infrastructure shortfalls and supports thousands of good-paying jobs along the way. We've also included $40 million in grants to local governments to fund water resiliency, infrastructure designed to tackle stormwater management, coastal erosion, and flooding. In addition to these investments in infrastructure, my budget funds clean energy initiatives and allocates funds for environmental protection. While we approach the one-year mark of COVID and continue following safety protocols and put shots in arms, we still face multiple long-term challenges that are not going away and that need to be dealt with. One of these is climate change, a crisis that directly impacts our public health, environment, economy, and our families. The reality is, climate change has already caused tangible harm throughout Michigan, with communities of color and low-income Michiganders bearing the brunt of its impact so far. And that is why I'm including items in my budget to protect the state from this existential crisis. $20 million for contaminated site cleanup to support rapid response to contaminated sites that pose an immediate threat. $5 million for the State Facility Green Revolving Fund, which is a catalyst for energy efficiency and renewable energy projects at state facilities, helping reduce the state's carbon footprint. $5 million for the Michigan Saves Green Bank to leverage private investment in clean energy improvements by incentivizing lenders to provide more favorable rates and terms for renewable energy improvements, promoting $150 million in capital, private capital, for clean energy improvements across the state. Together, these investments are a real step in the right direction and will help leave our children and grandchildren a cleaner, safer, and healthier world. Now, another piece of this budget is dedicated to helping Michigan's businesses and workers so that we can pursue our potential. Businesses, especially our small businesses, have been hit hard by the pandemic and the resulting economic downturn. You can feel it. You can see it. This pandemic has disrupted every aspect of our lives, and all of us, Republicans and Democrats, small business owners and students, parents and healthcare professionals, we've got to be united in our fight against it. We all know a restaurant or a nail salon, a cornerstone of a community that is facing tough times because of the pandemic that we are living through. But knowing what I know about Michiganders, I know that we are resilient. To support small businesses, I've already proposed $225 million in my COVID recovery plan. That's the Michigan COVID recovery plan to target small businesses that have been left out of other relief programs, ensuring they have the resources they need to recover and to grow. We also are launching a brand new $25 million in Mobility Futures initiative that supports a statewide effort to ensure that Michigan continues to drive the future of mobility and electrification. Michigan put the world on wheels and the industry continues to move forward. So we need to adapt and leverage our state's competitive advantages and decades of experience to work on the frontier of innovation in the autonomous, electric, shared, and connected vehicle spaces. So workers in Michigan have also adapted to the new reality we face and have risen to the challenge. Our people continue to be the engine of our economy, and their efforts will power us to new highs as we move into 2021. And that's why my budget makes significant investments in working people, ensuring that they continue to succeed. For direct healthcare workers, I'm proud to announce that we are permanently extending the $2 per hour wage increase with a bold $360 million investment. These heroes have been working tirelessly amid grave public health crisis, and they deserve to be compensated for their dedication. In the past, I've outlined my administration's broader 60 by 30 goal, working toward getting to 60% of our Michigan adult population to where they hold a post-secondary certificate or degree by 2030. This budget takes tangible steps to make that target, which is now less than a decade away. We can make that a reality. So how do we do that? By putting nearly $200 million toward programs that help Michiganders access professional certificate, skills training, higher education. We can boost their career opportunities amidst an economic downturn. And there is a desire to pursue these paths. A few highlights: $120 million for the Michigan Reconnect, which was created with bipartisan support and provides Michiganders 25 and up a tuition-free path to attend in-demand industry certificate programs or attain an associate's degree. We also have $60 million for Futures for Frontliners, which offers college tuition to essential workers who've been working tirelessly through the pandemic to help keep the rest of us going. $15 million for the Going Pro program, which expands employer-based training grants for new and current employees in high-demand skilled trades. And $3 million for a statewide apprenticeship program to expand our talent pool in the construction and building trades. We know that a path to a good life requires skills, and we want to make those paths accessible for more Michiganders so that Michigan businesses have the talent they need right here in Michigan. Every forward-looking aspect of this budget, the unprecedented education funding, the innovative infrastructure investments, and the workforce programs, every aspect is taking place against the backdrop of a raging pandemic. Our nation and the American people have endured so much pain and so much loss over the past year. Countless stories have been cut short by a deadly virus. Too many lives interrupted. Families have been changed forever. We as public servants owe the people we represent the absolute best. And a lot of that starts with healing deep wounds opened by this virus. We're also including multiple investments in this budget around my equity agenda, considering that this virus has disproportionately affected Michiganders of color. This includes $7.4 million to expand the Healthy Moms and Healthy Babies initiative to provide home visiting services to families with infants born with substance exposure. $6.7 million for the Sickle Cell Disease Initiative to expand treatment coverage to around 400 adults and increase outreach and clinical capacity, supporting the estimated 4,000 Michigan residents living with sickle cell disease, which disproportionately affects Black Michiganders. $8.4 million to reduce health disparities and expand the use of community-based navigators to enhance access to coverage and improve screening, data sharing, and interoperability of existing systems through the Michigan Health Information Network. And $1.6 million for the race equity, I think that's actually $2.1 million for the Race Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Office to promote racial equity and inclusion in all Department of Health and Human Services programs. My 2022 budget is laser focused on putting Michigan back to work, getting kids back in school, and keeping Michiganders safe. By expanding skills training, access to childcare for families, making critical investments to fix crumbling bridges and water infrastructure, and helping small businesses recover from a historic economic downturn. We're taking concrete steps to move Michigan forward, and I'm confident that we can come out of this crisis stronger than ever before. In conjunction with the Michigan COVID Recovery Plan, this budget will help us build a better Michigan for all. I'll continue reaching across the aisle and engage with the legislature in good faith to ensure that we do not waste a dime of federal aid that we have received so far, and make further investments so we can all help the state that we love get back on its feet. I ran on fixing the damn roads, improving public education and skills training, protecting and expanding healthcare, and cleaning up our water environment. But in the face of historic colliding crises, we must do more and we must be better. This budget is a step in the right direction on the issues I ran on and the stakes of the moment we face today. It invests in our people. It funds key projects and unlocks potential. It's a balanced budget, and it's the spark that we need to jumpstart our economy so we can get rolling on the road to recovery. In tandem with the Michigan COVID Recovery Plan I released, my 2022 budget can make a meaningful impact on our state and help us build back better from the pandemic and the recession. So thank you for joining me today. I look forward to reaching across the aisle and working with the legislature to get this done by June 30th. And now I'd like to turn it over to Budget Director Dave Mazeron to talk through some of the nitty-gritty details.
Governor, I think at this point you covered the budget quite extensively. So I think I'll happily wait for questions.
Sounds good. Let's do it. Let's open it up.
All right, just a reminder to everybody, if you have a question, please use the raise hand feature at the bottom of the Zoom screen there. And with that, we'll turn it over to Rick Albin, Wood TV, for the first question.
Governor, I know that in your Michigan recovery plan, you have extra money for schools to make up for the learning loss that children have experienced during this pandemic. And you also have a per pupil increase between $82 and $164 in the budget you just proposed today. But beyond that, separate from the COVID recovery plan, is there money in the budget that you rolled out today for more remediation and learning loss from that learning loss?
There are additional resources that we've dedicated, but I'm going to ask the budget director to give you a little more detail on that, Rick.
Thanks, Governor. There's $200 million for enrollment stability supports, which districts deal with the continuing decline of enrollment that we've seen. So there's stability in how those districts continue to operate. And there's a number of investments, including through some additional federal funding that's in this budget, in investing in the physical and mental well-being of our students to provide additional supports and additional summer school programs, both this summer and next.
We'll go to Beth LeBlanc with the Detroit News for our next question.
Hi, Governor. Thanks for taking these questions. Some of the GOP legislators afterwards were asking questions or concerned about the fact that the education funding didn't have ties or requirements that schools resume in-person learning. Are there ties that they're not aware of that are in there, or is that even going to be a concern next fall, in your opinion?
Well, it is my great hope that that's not a concern next fall, but I do think that it's important. We're mindful of acknowledging that we've got over 800 school districts in Michigan. They are, I do respect that each of them has different challenges and different capabilities. And so while we are strongly encouraging them to offer an in-person option by March 1st, that is something that is happening at the local level. Our job is to make sure that we give them the support they need to be successful. And that's what this budget does. And if the legislature would pass that Michigan COVID recovery plan, schools would have much greater resources to ensure that they can get back and stay safe in doing so. The federal government has allocated real resources to states across the country This was done in December. We've asked last month that they move these dollars and deploy them so that schools can do what they need to do to return safely in person, and so that we can continue building up our COVID response, both of which are crucial to be successful in terms of in-person learning, and all of which is funded in that supplemental, which hasn't yet moved through the legislature, which we're hoping they move quickly, post haste, because that's an essential piece to being successful in terms of the resumption of in-person schooling.
We'll take Eric Lloyd, 9 and 10 News, for the next question.
Hello, Governor. I was just wondering, with the COVID relief supplemental, if it is either dragged on or isn't passed to what you would like to see, how much does that possibly hold up this budget plan or kind of derail it because you would have to backfill some of the issues that you might see?
I think the greatest danger in the legislature not moving swiftly on the supplemental and not moving all of the federal dollars that have been made available is that we need to run a real COVID response to get to 70% of our population inoculated as quickly as possible. Our ability to do that, though, is absolutely relying on those federal dollars getting deployed into and across the state of Michigan. We have to buy COVID tests. It's crucial that we continue the ability to test and know where COVID resides and be able to trace. And all of those supplies are dependent on the resources, and that's what those federal dollars are for. And that's precisely why sitting on these dollars or meeting them out in smaller pieces undermines our ability to get to that 70% as quickly as possible. And I know that's what unites all of us. We want a resumption of normalcy. We want to get to 70% so that we can do a lot of the things and be safe doing it and make Michigan a leader. But those resources are a critical component of that.
We'll turn it over to Carol Thompson with the Lansing State Journal for the next question.
Hey, thanks for taking my question. I'd like to learn more about this Diversity and Inclusion Office at the Department of Health and Human Services. Would this mean hiring more people to take on the responsibility outlined for this office? And what kind of authority would they have to actually make changes to the policies that they review?
Dave, you want to jump in?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It does include additional FTEs or full-time equivalent employees. And I know Director Hertel plans to have this office review all the policy promulgation that DHHS does across the board. In terms of its interaction with all of DHHS policy and what its exact authority is, I think I would defer that to Director Hertel as she builds out her management team over at DHHS.
Kyle Mullen, we'll go to you for the next question with MERS.
Thank you so much for taking my question. Governor, did you have to make any cuts in this budget? And if so, what were they to?
First, I'm going to just say, Carol, we can connect you with DHHS to put a little more if you've got further questions. So Bobby will follow up with you on that. Yeah, Kyle, I mean, this is a $67 billion budget, 11.4 in the general fund, 14.7 in the school aid fund. There are some, we did, make some decisions around where we could find some efficiencies, but nothing that undermines a core initiative of any particular department. I think to the tune of, their cuts to the tune of about $19 million in here is, I think is accurate. And the budget director's nodding, so I get it right.
We'll turn it over to Emily Lawler with MLive.
Hi, Governor. Republicans have expressed a concern about sort of overall budgetary inflation. A lot of the spending you propose is one time. I'm looking at things like the college and university increase, some of the childcare proposals. Are those things that you envision wanting to keep going beyond just this budget year? And where does the money come from for things like that?
Well, Emily, we had to really, we are still in the midst of this global pandemic and economic crisis that, is related to it, caused by it, frankly. And as we look to re-engage in our economy, we utilize dollars that are one time for investments that will really help us get our economy back on track and get people back to work and give people the ability to get into skills that lead them to better and more recession-proof jobs, by the way. So I think that, that was our philosophy as we've built this budget. We are mindful that there is some one-time funding in here, but this is also a unique moment where we've got to really be focused on re-engaging our economy. And childcare is an important part of what's going on with women leaving the workforce right now, and what families are struggling with, and what employers need solved as well. So would we like a long-term solution in that space? Absolutely. Do we welcome partnership to design that? Absolutely as well.
The next question will come from Zach Gorchow with Gongwer.
Good afternoon, Governor. There are a number of specific investments in this budget that provide pretty substantial increases, and I think the GF increase overall is something like 7.5%. But as far as some of the major sort of ongoing budget areas, it's basically an inflationary increase, 2%, whether you're talking revenue sharing, universities, colleges, even the per pupil grant is a relatively small increase. I mean, for those entities out there they're hurting, local governments are hurting, schools are, trying to muddle through, same with higher ed. It seems like a pretty restrained budget, not much in the way of an increase. Can you speak to that?
I mean, it's the realities of the moment that we're in. We wanted to prioritize and really stay laser focused on the things that we need to do to help get our state through this tough time and get our economy back on track. And so we've really been disciplined about staying focused in those spaces. And I hope that by doing so, we will see that there is some common ground there, and that people recognize this is for the health of the Michigan economy and the Michigan people and the children of Michigan. And that's something that isn't partisan. It isn't about one philosophy or another. This is about getting the fundamentals right and being responsible with the resources that we have. We're in a stronger position than what we anticipated because of the crisis that we've confronted and the way that we've managed through this and the way that we've gotten some federal resources. And we wanted to prioritize it so that we can really be focused on the re-engagement of our economy. Anything to add, Dave?
I think 100% it's an inflationary budget. That's the constraints of the revenue that we have.
Before we turn it over to the next individual, I just want to remind everybody that to submit a question, please use the raise your hand feature. We'll take a couple more questions. We'll hand it over to Chad Livengood, Cranes Detroit.
Yeah, I got two Dave questions here. One, the $70 million in payments to the cities with income tax. Dave, you just came from a city with an income tax. Is $25 million really going to be enough to cover the losses that Detroit will experience and other cities? And secondly, how much school aid funding is being transferred to the general fund in this budget?
Starting with the first question you asked first, Chad, you're right. The $70 million doesn't cover all of the losses and revenue that cities face. We think that this is an investment, given the resources we have, and helping cities continue to maintain the services that they did. Obviously, from the place where I came, Mayor Duggan had aggressively addressed the budget shortfalls that the city faced and was able to continue to have services. Providing additional funding will give them additional flexibility to provide more. But as the governor said before, we are constrained in the amount of resources we have versus relative breadth of need in a pandemic. As to your second question, Chad, I'll get you that answer in writing, so I get you the exact correct number.
Next question will come from Jim Kurtzner with WXYZ.
Good afternoon, Governor. A lot of this still rides on working with the Republican-controlled legislature You keep talking about why they should get on board with your supplemental, get on board with this. They are obviously trying to exercise some leverage here. They've been continuously bothered by the fact that you and your administration alone have been calling the shots when it comes to COVID restrictions, lockdowns, and so on. Before any of these budget measures can move forward with the supplemental or the main, how do you resolve that huge divide, that huge partisan conflict? And what have you done specifically to try to resolve that? Maybe even some behind the scenes talk with them to get some resolution moving forward. We can talk all these numbers all day, but until you work as a team with the legislature, this really goes nowhere, doesn't it?
Well, Jim, I think it's funny that you asked what behind the scenes things are happening, because if they're behind the scenes, we don't talk about them. But I will just say, you know what, I've had an ongoing dialogue with the legislature, and my team and the staff of the legislative staff at the very highest levels have had ongoing dialogues. I have held quadrant meetings every other week. I have invited the legislature to participate in our modeling calls around COVID. I know that we don't agree on every policy decision that's been made, but those are powers that reside in the executive office for a reason, because the buck has to stop with the governor, especially when we are in the midst of a public health crisis. We can dig in and stay focused on all the things we don't agree on from last year, or we can look forward and really work together to absolutely support the ability of our state to bounce back and be stronger than ever. And that's what the people of Michigan expect us to do. We've got to get our kids back in school. We've got to make sure that when they get back in school, they're safe, and their teachers and the support staff are as well. We're going to help small businesses that are struggling. One of the most important things we've got to do is build out our vaccine response and our COVID testing. All of these things are crucial to our mutual success. And that's why I'm going to stay focused on delivering for the people of Michigan. I don't hold grudges. I'm not backward looking. I don't even dig in and stop talking to people when they've threatened to perpetrate violence against me, which is what happened just this week. I'm not going to focus on that. I got too much work to do, and the people of Michigan want us to get this done. So I'll continue to reach out and look for partners in the legislature. I'm glad to say there are people on both sides of the aisle that would like to return to a place where the governor introduces a budget, the legislature starts to look at it, decide their priorities, and then we negotiate and we get it done by the end of June. That is ideal for the people of our state, and that's key to our economy bouncing back as strong as it can.
We'll take a couple more questions. Rod Maloney at WDIV.
Apologies, Governor. I had my mute button on, didn't know I had it.
I mean, it wouldn't be a Zoom call if someone didn't do that, Rod.
Yeah.
Good to talk to you.
You were just discussing the notion of building out the vaccine response. And as I understand it, there's something between $40 and $50 million from the last supplemental that has not been distributed. And I was curious if you knew, one, is that accurate? Two, why that money is being held back and what the intent is to spend that money forward to get the build out on the vaccine response.
Rod, I don't have some insight on that, but I see the budget director leaning in. Do you, Dave? Or do we need to follow up?
Yeah, we can follow up, but I think it's important, all of us, when we're talking about money being spent or not spent, to think about the fact that revenues for local governments or local providers have to enter into contracts with us before they go forward and take action. And then they submit to us after the fact for reimbursement. So whether or not the money went out or didn't go out has nothing to do with whether or not we've committed that funding to be used in a particular circumstance. So we'll get back to you with the specific amount that's been committed, but I think we need to be very careful when we're talking about how expenditures are made and understand how governments work, in that government needs to have a source of funding before it takes action. And that's why we need the money and the authority in place, so we can enter into contracts with our local providers and begin to build out capacity to get these vaccines going into arms.
And the last question before we wrap up will come from Paul Egan with the Detroit Free Press.
Hi, Governor. The universities are saying that their increase, a 2% increase, is using one-time money, so it's not building on the base. They're saying that's unprecedented, and it really doesn't give them protection from inflation if this is an inflationary budget. Why was it done that way instead of giving a regular 2% increase?
I'm going to ask the budget director to take that one, Paul.
Yeah, so I think it's important to know that the last budget was flat. We have one-time funding available equal to the 2%, plus an additional $70 million going to these institutions because we have that revenue and that funding today. But we have to be mindful, and the governor has always said we have to be responsible about future budget years. And so what we're alerting the universities to is the fact that we have a budget in fiscal year 23 that's very tight. And we will work to drive as much resource as we can when we get there to those institutions. But right now, we know we have this funding today, and we're going to give this funding, or we're proposing to drive that funding to the institutions today.
Thank you, Director. Thank you, Governor. Appreciate everybody for joining us.
Thanks, everyone. Take care.